Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the ESS Vengeance, watching the stars through the main viewing window. The ship was quiet now, but it had not always been this way. 3 months ago, this same bridge had been filled with the sounds of battle. Alarms had screamed, weapons had fired, and good people had died. The war was over now. The Xanthari Empire had fallen. But the scars remained. Morrison touched a dark stain on the metal wall next to his command chair. It was blood, human blood. Lieutenant Collins had died right here when a Xanthari plasma blast had torn through the hull. The repair teams had fixed the hole, but they had left the stain. Everyone on the ship knew why. "Admiral," came a voice from behind him. Morrison turned to see Captain Lisa Hayes walking toward him. She held a data pad in her hands, and her face looked serious. "What is it, Lisa?" Morrison asked. "We just got a message from Earth Command." "But it's not from Earth." Hayes handed him the data pad. "It's from something called the Galactic Council." Morrison took the pad and read the message. His eyes grew wide as he read each word. "To the representatives of the species known as humanity," the message began. "We are the Galactic Council, a union of 47 species that work together to keep peace in this galaxy. We have watched your recent conflict with the Xanthari Empire. We have seen your strength and your courage. We invite you to join us." Morrison read on. The message was signed by Ambassador Zeeth Kari of the Altarian Collective. It gave humanity 30 days to travel to the Council headquarters in the Andromeda sector. They were to bring their most representative ships. 30 days, Morrison said aloud. "They want our best ships in 30 days. Hayes nodded. "That's the problem, sir. Look around." Morrison did look around. The bridge of the ESS Vengeance told the story of the war. Burn marks covered the walls where enemy fire had gotten through. The floor had dark stains where wounded crew members had been treated. Even the captain's chair had a long scratch across the back from flying metal during the battle at Wolf 359. "The whole fleet is like this," Hayes continued. 12 ships, all carrying the marks of war. Chief Engineer Danny Brooks says he needs at least 6 months to make them look proper for a diplomatic mission. Morrison walked to the main window and looked out at the other ships in the fleet. The S Defiant had a huge dent in her side where a Xanthari missile had hit but failed to explode. The ESS Retribution was missing half her paint, burned away by acid weapons. Every ship showed the cost of their victory. "Sir," came another voice. Morrison turned to see Dr. Helen Carter entering the bridge. She was the fleet's expert on alien life and cultures. "I've been studying this message. Do you know what this means?" "It means we're being invited to join some kind of galactic government," Morrison replied. "It's bigger than that," Carter said. "The Galactic Council has existed for over 2,000 years. They've kept peace between dozens of species. No one gets invited to join unless they've proven themselves worthy." "Worthy of what?" "Of being trusted with the safety of the galaxy." Morrison thought about this. 3 years ago, humanity had been alone in space. They had known other species existed, but they had never made contact. Then the Xanthari Empire had attacked the human colony on New Brasilia. The war that followed had been brutal and long. "What do we know about these council species?" Morrison asked. Carter pulled up a holographic display. Images of various alien species appeared in the air. Most of them are peaceful. They focus on trade, science, and culture. They solve problems by talking, not fighting. "And the Xanthari?" "That's interesting," Carter said. "I've been checking the galactic databases they gave us access to. The Xanthari Empire has been a problem for many species for decades. The Council received hundreds of complaints about Xanthari attacks on smaller, peaceful species. What did they do about it? Nothing effective. They sent diplomatic messages. They held meetings. They wrote strongly worded letters. But they never took military action. Morrison felt a cold anger growing in his chest. You mean other species were being attacked, and the Council did nothing? They tried to solve it peacefully. But the Xanthari don't understand peace. They only understand strength. Hayes stepped forward. Sir, what are you thinking? Morrison looked at the blood stain on the wall again. Then he looked at his officers. These good people who had fought beside him for 3 years. They had all lost friends in this war. They had all seen things that would stay with them forever. I'm thinking about Lieutenant Collins, Morrison said. I'm thinking about the 12,000 humans who died in this war. I'm thinking about the Corvani colonies we found destroyed on Kepler 442. I'm thinking about the Valthara refugees we rescued from the prison ships. The bridge was silent. Everyone remembered those discoveries. The Xanthari had not just attacked humans. They had been destroying entire civilizations. Sir, Hayes said quietly, what are your orders? Morrison stood up straight. We're going to accept their invitation. But sir, the ships, we're going exactly as we are, Morrison interrupted. We're not going to hide what we've done. We're not going to pretend this war was clean and easy. We're going to show them what it really costs to protect innocent people. Chief Engineer Danny Brooks had been listening from the engineering station. Admiral, with respect, these ships look like we've been through hell. We have been through hell, Danny, and we came out the other side. If the Galactic Council wants to see humanity's most representative ships, then they're going to see ships that have actually fought for something that matters. Carter looked worried. Sir, this could be a diplomatic disaster. First impressions are very important in galactic politics. Morrison walked to the center of the bridge and looked at each of his officers. Helen, what do you think would have happened if we hadn't fought the Xanthari? Carter thought for a moment. Based on the data I've seen, they would have continued attacking peaceful species. Eventually, they might have grown strong enough to challenge the Council directly. And how many innocent people would have died while the Council held meetings and sent diplomatic messages? Carter's face grew pale. Millions, maybe billions. Then we did the right thing, Morrison said. And if the Galactic Council can't understand that, then maybe they need to learn what real peace costs. Hayes nodded slowly. When do we leave? Tomorrow. Send word to the other ships. We're going to the Andromeda sector, and we're going with honor. As the bridge crew began preparing for the journey, Morrison looked out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council was waiting. They would see humanity's ships, stained with blood and scarred by war. They would have to decide what those scars meant. Morrison hoped they would understand that sometimes the only way to protect peace is to be willing to fight for it. The ESS, Vengeance and her sister ships, began their journey to meet the galaxy. The human fleet had been traveling through hyperspace for 2 weeks. Admiral Morrison walked through the corridors of the ESS Vengeance, observing the daily life of his crew. The ship was running smoothly, but the marks of war were everywhere dot in. The medical bay, Dr. Sarah Williams, was checking the emergency supplies. The walls still showed patches where Xanthari acid had eaten through the metal. She had performed surgery in this very room while the ship was under attack. 3 crew members had died on the table she now used for routine checkups. How are the supplies, Doctor? Morrison asked. We're well stocked, Admiral. But I keep thinking about the wounded we treated during the siege of New Brasilia. We saved so many lives in this room. Morrison nodded. Every part of the ship held memories like this. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Foster was on duty in the communications center. He had been monitoring the galactic communication networks during their journey. What he had discovered was fascinating. Admiral, Foster said when Morrison entered, you need to hear this. Foster played back several recorded messages. They were from alien ships that had seen the human fleet passing through their space. The messages were not in English, but the computer had translated them. "Unknown human vessels, we salute your courage," said one message from a Corvani transport ship. "We remember New Brasilia. We remember how you fought for those who could not fight." Another message came from a Valthara merchant vessel. "Human warriors, our children sing songs of your victory. The nightmare is over because of your sacrifice. Morrison." Listen to dozens of these messages. They came from species he had never heard of, from ships traveling throughout the galaxy. All of them knew about the war. All of them were grateful. "Sir," Foster said, "it seems news of our war with the Xanthari has spread throughout the galaxy. These species have been suffering from Xanthari attacks for decades." In the Marine quarters, Colonel Amy Watson was conducting a routine inspection. The Marines kept their equipment in perfect condition, but their barracks still showed the scars of battle. Plasma burns on the walls, patched holes in the ceiling, and memorial plaques for fallen comrades. Sergeant Major Tony Miller was cleaning his rifle when Watson entered. He had been with the ground forces during the siege of New Brasilia, where human troops had held a critical supply depot for 6 months against overwhelming odds. "Tell me about New Brasilia again, Tony," Watson said. Miller looked up from his weapon. "It was hell, Colonel. The Xanthari had us surrounded for months. We were running out of food, ammunition, everything. But we knew that if we fell, the supply line to the outer colonies would be cut. Thousands of civilians would die. What kept you going?" "The knowledge that we were protecting innocent people. Not just humans, but all the species the Xanthari were attacking. We found evidence of their crimes in every system we liberated." Watson nodded. She had seen the evidence, too. The Xanthari had been systematic in their cruelty. They had destroyed entire civilizations, enslaved populations, and conducted horrible experiments on prisoners. In the navigation center, Lieutenant Steve Collins was studying the galactic maps. He had made an important discovery about their destination. The Galactic Council headquarters was located in the Nexus system, at the center of galactic civilization. "Admiral," Collins said when Morrison visited his station, "I've been looking at the shipping routes around the Nexus system. Something interesting is happening." Collins brought up a holographic display of ship movements. "See these patterns? Ships from the Outer Rim territories are changing their routes. They're all moving toward the Nexus system. Why? I think they want to be there when we arrive. Look at this." Collins highlighted specific ship types. "These are all species that were attacked by the Xanthari. Corvani, Valthara, Nexari, and dozens of others." Morrison studied the display. "They're coming to see us." "It looks that way, sir. And there's something else. I've been monitoring Council communications. There's a big debate happening about our invitation." "What kind of debate?" "Some Council members are questioning whether we should be allowed to join. They're calling us too violent, too aggressive, but the Outer Rim species are defending us. They're saying we did what the Council couldn't do." In the ship's library, Dr. Carter was researching everything she could find about the Galactic Council. The more she learned, the more concerned she became. "Admiral," she said, when Morrison found her surrounded by data displays, "I think we need to prepare for a hostile reception." "What do you mean?" "The Council is dominated by species from the core worlds. They've lived in peace for so long that they've forgotten what war looks like. They solve everything through diplomacy and trade. Agreements." Carter brought up images of various Council species. "Look at their ships. They're all beautiful, clean, perfect. They use their vessels for exploration, trade, and ceremony. They've never had to fight for their survival." Morrison looked at the images. The alien ships were indeed beautiful. They were smooth, elegant, and pristine. They looked nothing like the battle-scarred human fleet. "They're not going to understand us," Carter continued. "When they see our ships, they're going to see violence and aggression. They won't see the sacrifice and the protection we provided. Then we'll have to help them understand," Morrison said. On the S. Defiant, Captain Tim Brooks was dealing with a similar situation. His ship had taken the worst damage during the battle at Wolf 359. Half the hull was patched with emergency repairs, and the other half was blackened by enemy fire. "Captain," his communications officer reported, "we're getting more messages from alien ships. They want to escort us to the Nexus system." Brooks looked at the display. 3 Corvani vessels were requesting permission to join the human fleet. They wanted to travel with the humans to the Council headquarters. "Sir," his first officer said, "what should we tell them?" Brooks thought for a moment. "Tell them they're welcome to join us. But remind them that we're not going to a parade. We're going to a diplomatic meeting where we might not be welcome." The response from the Corvani ships was immediate. "We understand, human captain. We go to bear witness to your honor." Similar requests came from other species. By the end of the week, the human fleet had been joined by over 30 alien ships. Corvani, Valara, Nexari, and many others. They formed a convoy around the human vessels, protecting them and honoring them. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the HFY Vengeance, watching the alien ships around them. These were the species that had suffered under Xanthari oppression. These were the people they had fought to protect. "Admiral," Hayes said, incoming message from the lead Corvani ship. "Put it through." The holographic display showed a tall, thin alien with golden skin and large eyes. "Admiral Morrison, I am Captain Velinith of the Corvani Defense Force. My people owe you a debt that can never be repaid. Captain, you owe us nothing. We fought because it was the right thing to do. That is why we honor you. The Xanthari destroyed 4 of our colonies. They killed millions of our people. The Galactic Council sent us sympathy messages, but they sent no help. You came with weapons and ships stained with battle. You came to fight." Morrison felt the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. "We lost many good people in that war, Captain, and we remember every one of them. Our children learned their names. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten." As the convoy approached the edge of the Nexus system, Morrison gathered his senior officers for a final briefing. "In a few hours, we'll be at the Galactic Council headquarters," he said. "We don't know what kind of reception we'll get. Some council members support us, others oppose us. But remember this, we're not going there to apologize for what we've done. We're going there to represent not just humanity, but all the species that have suffered while the council debated." The officers nodded. They understood their mission. The convoy dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus system. Before them lay the largest artificial structure any human had ever seen. The Galactic Council headquarters was a massive space station surrounded by hundreds of alien ships from across the galaxy. Morrison looked at the magnificent sight, then at his own battle-scarred ship. Soon, the galaxy would see what humanity had become. Soon, they would understand what it meant to fight for peace. The convoy moved forward into history. Asterisk. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus system, and Admiral Morrison felt his breath catch in his throat. The Galactic Council headquarters stretched before them like a small moon made of metal and crystal. It was beautiful and massive, with thousands of docking ports and communication arrays reaching out in all directions. But it was the ships that made Morrison stare in wonder. Hundreds of vessels from dozens of species surrounded the station. They were unlike anything humanity had ever built. Some looked like flowing water frozen in space. Others were perfect geometric shapes that seemed to bend light around them. A few appeared to be grown rather than built, with organic curves and living surfaces. "My God," whispered Captain Hayes, standing beside Morrison on the bridge. "Look at them all." The S-Vengeance moved slowly through the outer edge of the system, followed by the other 11 ships of the human fleet. Behind them came the 37 alien vessels that had joined them during the journey. Corvani, Valthara, Nexari, and many other species that had suffered under Xanthari attacks. "Admiral," came the voice of Lieutenant Commander Foster from the communication station. "We're being hailed by the station." "Put it through." The main display showed a tall, elegant being with silver skin and eyes that seemed to hold starlight. "Admiral Morrison, I am Council Director Veltar of the Ethereal Collective. Welcome to the Nexus System." "Thank you, Director." "We're honored to be here." Veltar's expression was difficult to read, but Morrison sensed curiosity. "Your fleet presents an unusual appearance for a diplomatic mission, Admiral. Are these truly your most representative vessels?" Morrison looked around his bridge. The walls still showed burn marks from enemy fire. The floor had dark stains from wounded crew members. Memorial plaques lined the corridors, honoring those who had died in the war. "Yes, Director. These ships have served humanity faithfully. They bear the marks of our service to galactic peace." There was a long pause before Veltar responded. "I see. Please proceed to Docking Bay 77. The Council will convene in 6 hours." As the human fleet moved toward the station, Morrison noticed something strange happening among the other ships. Chief Security Officer Pete Manning was the first to comment on it. "Admiral, you should see this," Manning said from his station. "The alien ships are moving." Morrison looked at the tactical display. Ships from the Outer Rim territories were changing their positions. They were not moving away from the human fleet, but toward it. They were forming what looked like a protective corridor. "It's like they're making a path for us," Hayes observed. Intelligence Officer Nancy Price was analyzing the ship movements. "Sir, I'm reading defensive formations from multiple species. But they're not defending against us. They're defending us." Captain Tim Brooks's voice came through the communication system from the ESS Defiant. "Admiral, we're receiving private messages from individual alien captains." "What kind of messages?" "Congratulations, sir. They're congratulating us on our victory over the Xanthari Empire." Morrison felt a strange mixture of pride and sadness. Pride in what his people had accomplished, sadness for the cost they had paid. As the human fleet moved through the corridor of alien ships, more messages came through. The Valkorian trade vessels were broadcasting what their computers translated as ancient war songs. The crystalline Nexari ships were projecting complex light patterns that Dr. Carter identified as symbols of gratitude and respect. "Admiral," Carter said, joining Morrison on the bridge, "I think I understand what's happening here." "Explain." "Word has spread throughout the galaxy about our war with the Xanthari. The species from the Outer Rim territories have been suffering from Xanthari attacks for decades. They view us not as another diplomatic mission, but as their saviors." Morrison watched as a group of small Corvani ships flew in formation around the ESS Vengeance. Their hulls were decorated with symbols that looked like flames and stars. "What are those symbols?" Morrison asked. Carter consulted her translator. "They're memorial symbols, sir. They're honoring our dead." The human fleet finally reached the massive docking station. As they approached, Morrison could see the incredible variety of ships already docked there. Each species had their own unique design philosophy. Some ships were works of art. Others were marvels of engineering. All of them were clean, perfect, and beautiful. The human ships looked like wounded animals in comparison. "Admiral," Hayes said quietly, "are you sure about this?" Morrison looked at the blood stain on the wall near his command chair. Lieutenant Collins had died right there, defending the ship and the principles it represented. 12,000 humans. had died in the war against the Xanthari Empire. They had died protecting innocent people from a ruthless enemy. Yes, Lisa, I'm sure. As the ESS Vengeance settled into its docking bay, Morrison could see alien beings gathering at the viewing ports. They were watching the human ships with great interest. Some looked curious, others seemed concerned, and a few appeared to be in awe. "Sir," Manning reported, "station security is requesting permission to board and conduct a standard diplomatic inspection." "Granted. But make sure they understand that our ships are functional military vessels, not pleasure craft." The inspection team that boarded the ESS Vengeance was led by a being that looked like a walking tree with silver bark and glowing blue leaves. The translator identified him as Security Chief Rethmos of the Arboran Collective. Rethmos moved slowly through the corridors of the ship, examining everything with great care. He stopped at each memorial plaque, reading the names of the fallen. He touched the burn marks on the walls and examined the patched holes in the hull. "These are battle scars," he said finally. "Yes," Morrison replied. "We fought a war." "A war that we should have fought," Rethmos said quietly. "The Xanthari Empire attacked the outer territories for decades. The Council held meetings while people died." Morrison didn't know how to respond to that. Rethmos continued his inspection, moving to the medical bay where Dr. Williams was waiting. The alien security chief looked at the patched walls and the bloodstains on the floor that had never completely washed away. "Many died here," he observed. "Many lived here too," Dr. Williams replied. "This room saved hundreds of lives during the war." Rethmos nodded slowly. "The Council has never seen ships like these. Most of our vessels are used for trade, exploration, and ceremony. Your ships are tools of war." "Tools of protection," Morrison corrected. "We fought to protect innocent people." "Yes," Rethmos agreed. "That is what makes them so unusual." The inspection continued for 2 hours. Rethmos examined every part of the ship, from the engine room to the weapon systems. He spoke with crew members, asking them about their experiences in the war. He listened to their stories of sacrifice and loss. Finally, he returned to the bridge where Morrison was waiting. "Admiral," Rethmos said, "I must ask you something. Why did you not repair your ships before coming here? Why did you choose to arrive bearing these marks of war?" Morrison thought carefully before answering. "Because these marks represent the truth of what we've done. We could have hidden the cost of victory, but that would have been dishonest. The galaxy needs to see what it really takes to protect the innocent." Rethmos was quiet for a long moment. The council chambers have seen many diplomatic missions over the centuries. Ships bearing gifts, delegates in ceremonial robes, species presenting their finest achievements. But they have never seen anything like what you bring today. What do we bring? Proof that peace has a price, and evidence that someone was willing to pay it. As the inspection team prepared to leave, Rethmos turned back to Morrison. "Admiral, there will be debate about your admission to the Council. Some species believe that your methods are too violent for our organization. Others believe that your actions saved the galaxy from a terrible threat. What do you believe?" Rethmos looked around the bridge one more time, his glowing blue leaves rustling softly. "I believe that the galaxy is safer because of what you have done. I believe that the Council needs to understand the difference between peace and the absence of war." After the inspection team left, Morrison gathered his senior officers for a final briefing before the Council session. "In 1 hour, we'll be presenting humanity to the Galactic Council," he said. "We don't know what kind of reception we'll get. Some species support us, others oppose us. But remember this, we're not here to apologize for defending the innocent. We're here to represent not just humanity, but all the species that have suffered while others debated." Dr. Carter had been analyzing the political situation within the Council. "Sir, I've identified the key players. The core world species are likely to oppose us. They've lived in peace for so long that they see any military action as barbaric. But the Outer Rim species are strongly supportive. They've seen what the Xanthari were capable of. What about the neutral species? They're waiting to see how we present ourselves. Everything depends on how we handle the next few hours. Morrison looked at his officers, these good people who had fought beside him through the darkest days of the war. They had all lost friends and colleagues. They had all seen things that would stay with them forever. Whatever happens in the council chamber, Morrison said, remember that we fought for something greater than ourselves. We fought for the idea that Inuk, the Galactic Council chambers, were beyond anything Admiral Morrison had imagined. The room was enormous, with seating arranged in a perfect circle for 47 different species. Each section was designed for the specific needs of different alien physiologies. Some seats were filled with water for aquatic species. Others were surrounded by different atmospheric conditions, and a few were elevated platforms for flying beings. Morrison walked to the designated human platform, flanked by Dr. Carter and Colonel Watson. The chamber fell silent as hundreds of alien eyes turned to watch them. The platform was simple compared to the elaborate seating arrangements for other species, but it felt appropriate for humanity's first appearance before the galactic community. Council. Director Veltar stood at the center of the chamber, his silver skin reflecting the light from the crystal ceiling above. His voice carried clearly through the translation systems. We gather today to consider the admission of a new species to our council, Veltar began. The species known as humanity has requested membership in our organization. As is our tradition, we will hear their presentation and debate their suitability. For membership, Morrison felt the weight of history on his shoulders. Everything that happened in the next few hours would determine humanity's place in the galaxy. Admiral Morrison, Veltar continued, please present your species to the council. Morrison stepped forward. He had rehearsed this moment many times during the journey, but now that it was here, he decided to speak from the heart. Honored members of the Galactic Council, he began, I am Admiral Jake Morrison, representing the United Earth Federation. We come before you not as conquerors or as supplicants, but as beings who have learned the true cost of peace. He paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled aliens. Some looked curious, others seemed skeptical, and a few appeared genuinely interested in what he had to say. 3 years ago, humanity was alone in the galaxy. We had just begun to explore the stars when we encountered the Xanthari Empire. They attacked our colony at New Brasilia without warning, without provocation, and without mercy. We had a choice, surrender and watch our people be enslaved, or fight back. Morrison's voice grew stronger as he continued. We chose to fight, not because we wanted war, but because we understood that some things are worth fighting for. Freedom is worth fighting for. The lives of innocent people are worth fighting for. Justice is worth fighting for. In the section reserved for the Corvani delegation, Ambassador Kretak stood up. She was a tall, graceful being with golden skin and large, dark eyes. If I may, Director Veltar, I would like to add something to Admiral Morrison's statement. Veltar nodded. The Council recognizes Ambassador Kretak. The humans speak of fighting the Xanthari Empire, but they do not speak of what they found when they won, Kretak said. They found the ruins of our colonies. They found the mass graves of our people. They found the prison ships where our children were held as slaves. A murmur ran through the chamber. Many of the council members knew about the Xanthari attacks, but few had heard the details. For 40 years, Kretak continued, my people sent requests to this council for help. We filed reports about Xanthari attacks. We begged for protection. We received sympathy and promises of diplomatic solutions. But no help came. Morrison watched as the council members began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. This was not the kind of presentation they were used to hearing. Ambassador Quindella of the Hegemony Coalition stood up. She was a tall, thin being with blue skin and multiple arms. With respect to Ambassador Kretak, the Galactic Council has always sought peaceful solutions to conflicts. We do not resort to violence as a first option. What about as a last option? Morrison asked. How many peaceful solutions did you try with the Xanthari Empire? How many diplomatic messages did you send while innocent people were being slaughtered? The chamber erupted in discussion. Some council members were clearly uncomfortable with Morrison's direct questions. Others seemed to be considering his words carefully. Veltar called for order. Admiral Morrison, the council appreciates your directness, but we must question whether a species that arrives with ships stained by warfare is suitable for an organization dedicated to peace. Morrison had expected this challenge. Director Veltar, may I ask you a question? You may. What is the difference between peace and the absence of war? Veltar looked puzzled. I do not understand the distinction. Peace is when all beings can live free from fear and oppression. The absence of war is when no one is willing to fight against fear and oppression. For 40 years, there was an absence of war between the Council and the Xanthari Empire. But there was no peace for the species they attacked. Captain Lisa Hayes stepped forward. Morrison had not expected her to speak, but he trusted her judgment. If I may address the Council, Hayes said, I would like to present evidence of what we found in the former Xanthari territories. Veltar nodded. The Council will hear Captain Hayes. Hayes activated a holographic display that showed images from the liberated worlds. The pictures were horrifying. Destroyed cities, mass graves, and prison camps filled with aliens from dozens of species. This is what we found on Kepler 442, Hayes said. The Xanthari had been using this world as a testing ground for biological weapons. We found evidence of experiments on living beings from 7 different species. The chamber fell silent as the images continued. Hayes showed the ruins of Kravani cities, the remnants of Valthara colonies, and the scattered remains of civilizations that had been completely destroyed. This is Valtara 7, Hayes continued. The Xanthari turned this entire world into a slave camp. We found over 2 million beings from 14 different species being held in conditions that defy description. Morrison watched as many of the council members looked away from the images. They had known about Xanthari attacks, but they had not seen the reality of what those attacks meant. These beings were not soldiers, Hayes said. They were farmers, teachers, artists, and children. They were innocent people who had no way to defend themselves against the Xanthari Empire. Ambassador Zethkari of the Altarian Collective stood up. He was the one who had originally invited humanity to join the Council. Captain Hayes, what happened to these survivors? We freed them, Hayes replied. We provided medical care, food, and transportation back to their home worlds. We used our own resources to help them rebuild their lives. And is Xanthari responsible for these crimes? Morrison answered this question. Those who could be captured were turned over to the appropriate authorities. Those who continued to fight were eliminated. The chamber was quiet for a long moment. Finally, Ambassador Velinari of the Crystalline Nexari spoke. Her voice was like music, translated through the communication systems. Admiral Morrison, you speak of the cost of peace. What cost did humanity pay for this victory? Morrison felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders again. 12,000 humans died in the war against the Xanthari Empire. Our ships bear the scars of that conflict because we choose to remember what it cost us to protect the innocent. And would you pay that cost again? Without hesitation. The debate that followed was intense. Representatives from the core worlds argued that humanity's military approach was too violent for the Council. They believed that diplomatic solutions could have been found if given more time. Ambassador Quindella spoke for many of the core world. Species. The Galactic Council has maintained peace for over 2,000 years through negotiation and compromise. We fear that admitting a species that resorts to warfare will set a dangerous precedent. But the Outer Rim species had a different view. One by one, they stood to tell their stories of Xanthari oppression and council inaction. Ambassador Velinari of the Nexari described how her crystal cities had been shattered by Xanthari mining operations. We sent 47 requests for help to this council over 15 years. We received expressions of concern and promises of future action. Our cities remained in ruins. Ambassador Thren Kai of the Velthara Federation spoke of entire colonies that had vanished. The Xanthari took our people in the night. Whole worlds went silent. We begged the council for military assistance. We were told that violence was not the answer. Tell that to the families who will never see their children again. Morrison listened to story after story of council failure. Species after species had been attacked, enslaved, or destroyed while the council held meetings and wrote. Diplomatic protests. Director Veltar, Morrison said when the testimonies ended, "May I ask how long the council has known about these Xanthari attacks?" Veltar consulted his records. The first formal complaint was filed 63 years ago. And in all that time, what concrete action did the council take? We sent diplomatic missions. We filed formal protests. We imposed trade sanctions. Did any of these measures stop the attacks? There was a long silence before Veltar answered, "No." Morrison walked to the center of the chamber. "Honored council members, I do not stand here to condemn your efforts at peaceful resolution. Peace is always preferable to war. But I must ask you this. When peaceful methods fail, when innocent people are dying, when evil spreads unchecked across the galaxy, what then?" Admiral Morrison stood on the observation deck of the ESS Vengeance, looking out at the massive Galactic Council station. It had been 18 hours since the first council session, and the debate was still raging inside the chambers. Through the large windows, he could see delegates from different species meeting in small groups, arguing and discussing humanity's fate. Dr. Carter joined him at the window. "The Outer Rim species have been working all night," she reported. "They're organizing something, but they won't tell me what." Morrison nodded. He had been watching the unusual activity around the station. Ships from the outer territories had been moving into new formations, and there had been constant communications between their delegations. "Sir?" came a voice from behind them. Morrison turned to see Captain Hayes approaching with a data pad in her hands. "We just received something unusual. It's a formal petition addressed to the Galactic Council." Morrison took the pad and began reading. His eyes grew wide as he saw the contents. "What is it?" Carter asked. "It's a petition signed by 19 different species from the Outer Rim territories," Morrison said. "They're not just requesting our admission to the Council. They're proposing something much bigger." The petition detailed a complete reform of the Galactic Council's approach to aggressive species and territorial disputes. Instead of relying solely on diplomatic solutions that could take decades to implement, the Outer Rim species proposed the creation of a rapid response peacekeeping force. The force would be led by humanity, with volunteer contingents from other species who chose to participate. It would have the authority to intervene quickly when peaceful species were threatened by aggressive empires like the Xanthari. "They want us to become the galaxy's peacekeepers," Hayes observed. Morrison continued reading. The petition included detailed proposals for oversight, rules of engagement, and accountability measures. It was not a request for unlimited military power, but a carefully planned system for protecting the innocent when diplomacy failed. Admiral Foster called from the communication station. Incoming message from Council Director Veltar. Put it through. Veltar's image appeared on the main display. The silver-skinned alien looked tired, as if he had not slept during the night-long debates. Admiral Morrison, the Council has reached a decision regarding your species admission. Please report to the chambers in 1 hour for the final session. We'll be there, Director. As Morrison and his team prepared for the final session, Colonel Watson made an observation. Sir, look at the station's docking bays. Morrison looked where she was pointing. Ships from the core worlds were beginning to leave the station. Not all of them, but a significant number. The beautiful, pristine vessels of species that had never known war were departing before the final vote. They're afraid, Carter said. They're afraid of what we represent. Maybe, Morrison replied. Or maybe they're afraid of what they'll have to become if they accept us. An hour later, Morrison, Carter, and Watson entered the council chambers for the final session. The chamber looked different from the day before. Many of the seats that had been occupied by core world species were now empty. But the outer rim sections were packed, and there were new faces among the delegates. Director Veltar called the session to order. The Galactic Council has deliberated through the night regarding the admission of humanity to our organization. We have also considered the petition submitted by the Outer Rim territories for the establishment of a galactic peacekeeping force. Morrison felt his heart beating faster as Veltar continued. The vote on humanity's admission to the Council is as follows. 31 species vote in favor, 12 species vote against, and 4 species abstain. Humanity is hereby admitted to the Galactic Council. A cheer went up from the outer rim sections of the chamber. Morrison felt a wave of relief and pride wash over him. But Veltar was not finished. The Council has also voted on the proposal. For a galactic peacekeeping force, the vote is 27 species in favor, 15 species against, and 5 abstentions. The motion passes. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some delegates cheered, others looked concerned, and a few seemed genuinely frightened by what had just happened. Veltar called for order. Admiral Morrison, as the representative of humanity, and the proposed leader of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force, do you accept these responsibilities? Morrison stood up slowly. The weight of the moment was enormous. Humanity was not just joining the galactic community, they were being asked to become its protectors. Director Veltar, honored council members, I accept these responsibilities on behalf of humanity. But I want to make something very clear. The chamber fell silent. The Galactic Peacekeeping Force will not be a tool of conquest or oppression. It will not be used to force any species to join the Council or to impose our will on others. It will exist for one purpose only, to protect innocent beings from those who would harm them. Morrison looked around the chamber at the assembled delegates. We will work under Council oversight. We will follow strict rules of engagement. We will be accountable for our actions. And we will never forget that our power comes with the responsibility to use it wisely. Ambassador Kretak stood up. Admiral Morrison, the Outer Rim species have something to present to you. She walked to the center of the chamber carrying a small object. When she reached Morrison, she held it out for him to see. It was a simple metal disc, inscribed with symbols from dozens of different species. This is the Memorial of the Lost, Kretak explained. It bears the names of every being who died in Xanthari attacks over the past 60 years. We want you to carry it as a reminder of why the peacekeeping force exists. Morrison took the disc with trembling hands. The weight of it seemed much greater than its actual mass. I will carry it with honor. As the formal ceremonies concluded, Morrison found himself surrounded by delegates from the Outer Rim territories. They shook his hand, expressed their gratitude, and shared their hopes for a safer galaxy. But it was a conversation with Ambassador Velinari of the Nexari that stayed with him. Admiral, she said in her musical voice, many of the core world species fear what you represent. They see your scarred ships and think of violence. They do not understand that sometimes violence is necessary to preserve peace. I hope they will learn to understand, Morrison replied. Perhaps, but remember this. The scars on your ships are not marks of shame. They are proof that someone was willing to pay the price when others would not. Never let anyone convince you to hide those scars. As Morrison and his team prepared to return to their ship, Director Veltar approached them one final time. Admiral, the Council has assigned you a sector of space to patrol. It includes the former Xanthari territories and the Outer Rim worlds that have suffered the most from aggressive species. We'll do our best to keep them safe. I believe you will. But I must ask you something. Your ships bear the stains of war, and you have chosen to keep those stains visible. Why? Morrison thought for a moment before answering. Because those stains remind us of the cost of failure. Every mark on our ships represents a lesson learned, a friend lost, or an innocent life saved. If we hide those marks, we might forget why we fight. Veltar nodded slowly. Perhaps that is what the galaxy needs to remember, the cost of peace. Morrison and his team returned to the ESS Vengeance as the newly appointed leaders of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force. As they walked through the corridors of their battle-scarred ship, Morrison made a decision that would define humanity's role in the galaxy. Send word to all ships in the fleet, he told Hayes. The scars stay. Every burn mark, every patch, every stain. They are part of our history now, and they will remind us of our duty. Hayes smiled. Aye, sir. The scars stay. As the human fleet prepared to begin its new mission, Morrison stood once again on the bridge of the ESS Vengeance. He looked at the blood stain on the wall where Lieutenant Collins had died, and he made a promise to his fallen friend. We'll remember Collins. We'll remember all of them. The ESS Vengeance and her sister ships departed the Council Station to take up their positions as the guardians of galactic peace. They carried with them the scars of war and the hope of a better future. The age of pure diplomacy was over. The age of protected peace had begun, shepherded by ships stained with blood, but driven by the pursuit of justice. And in the years that followed, when young beings from across the galaxy asked why the human ships looked so different from all the others, they were told the story of the species that entered the Galactic Council on ships stained with blood, and chose to keep those stains as a reminder that peace is not free, it must be earned. It must be protected. And sometimes it must be paid for with the blood of those brave enough to fight for it. The galaxy was safer because someone had been willing to pay that price.